No one ever noticed Ova until something went wrong. That was the rule of places like Valor. If the music flowed, if the glasses stayed full, if the men with expensive watches felt powerful and uninterrupted, the staff might as well have been furniture. Necessary, replaceable, invisible. Ova understood this instinctively. She moved through the club with her shoulders slightly rounded, her gaze lowered just enough to signal deference. Her uniform was a size too large, the sleeves hanging past her wrists, the apron tied loosely at the waist to blur the shape of her body. Even her hair, dark, thick, capable of elegance, was pulled back into a severe knot that discouraged curiosity. It was camouflage. She had learned long ago that invisibility was not weakness. It was protection. Valor pulsed with low music and muted conversation, the kind of place where deals weren't spoken aloud but confirmed with eye contact and nods, where men laughed softly and never said what they meant, because they didn't need to. At the center of it all sat Joseph Moretti. He didn't demand attention. It arrived before he did. Men leaned in when he spoke. Waitstaff hesitated before approaching his table. Even the air around him felt heavier, like gravity had been recalibrated in his favor. Joseph Moretti wasn't loud. He didn't threaten. He didn't posture. He simply existed with the certainty of someone who had never been denied. Ova had served his table before. She remembered the way he barely glanced at her, not out of cruelty but indifference. The way his presence made other men nervous, how they laughed too quickly at his comments, how their shoulders tightened when he fell silent. Power recognized power, and Ova had spent her life learning how to stay out of its path. She balanced a tray of crystal glasses as she moved toward the VIP section, her steps measured, her breathing steady. The scent of polished wood, expensive liquor, and something sharper, fear, maybe, hung in the air. Then a voice cut through it. Wine. Not raised, not harsh, just absolute. Ova stopped. She knew that voice. She turned smoothly, schooling her face into calm compliance, and approached with the bottle tucked against her arm. "Yes, sir," she said. Her voice was soft by design, neutral, forgettable. She reached the table and began to pour, careful, precise. That's when it happened. A hand, large, careless, smelling faintly of whiskey, shot out and closed around her wrist. Ova felt it instantly. Not just the grip, but the intent behind it. Boredom, amusement, ownership. "Well, look at this one," the man said, tugging her closer. "Didn't expect that face under all this fabric." The bottle tilted. Ova felt it before she saw it. The shift in balance, the split-second loss of control. Red wine spilled. Slowly, thickly. Across Joseph Moretti's pristine white shirt, it bloomed like blood. The club didn't erupt. It collapsed into silence. Music faded. Conversations died mid-word. Even the bartender froze, hands still on the shaker. The man released Ova's wrist like it had turned to fire. Joseph looked down. He didn't rush. He studied the stain as if it were an abstract concept, his expression unreadable. Then he lifted his gaze and met Ova's eyes. For the first time, she looked directly at him. His eyes were dark, not angry, calculating. "I'm sorry," Ova said immediately. Her voice trembled just enough to sell the lie. She reached for a napkin, hands shaking. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean." A bodyguard intercepted her, fingers crushing around her hand. "Don't touch him," the man growled. Joseph stood. He was tall, broad-shouldered, immaculate even with wine soaking into his shirt. He took the napkin from Ova himself, dabbed absently at the stain, then dropped it to the floor. "This suit," he said quietly, "costs more than you make in a year." Ova swallowed. "I'll pay for it," she said. "I'll work it off, please." Joseph laughed, not loudly, not kindly. "You're a waitress," he said. "Do you know how long it would take you to repay this?" He stepped closer. Too close. He smelled like expensive cologne and something colder beneath it. "People like you usually cry by now." Ova didn't cry. Her breathing slowed instead. In through the nose, out through the mouth. A habit burned into muscle memory. Joseph noticed. Most people shook when he stood over them. She didn't. She was too still. His head tilted slightly. Then, without warning, he lifted his hand. Not to kill her, not even to seriously hurt her, just to humiliate. A slap meant to remind her where she stood. Ova moved. Not consciously. Her head slipped to the side, barely a fraction. Her hand rose, redirecting his forearm away from her face. The movement was precise, efficient, silent. Joseph's hand passed through empty air. The room held its breath. Ova realized what she'd done a heartbeat too late. She hunched immediately, eyes dropping, shoulders curling inward. I flinched, she whispered. I'm sorry. Joseph stared at her. The boredom was gone now, replaced by something sharper. A waitress, he said softly, doesn't dodge on instinct. He turned to his men. Clear the room. Confusion rippled through the booth. Boss? Everyone, Joseph repeated, his voice steel. Now. Chairs scraped. Patrons fled. Doors closed. Joseph unbuttoned his jacket slowly, deliberately, and rolled up his sleeves. You owe me, he said. And since you can't pay with money, he gestured toward the iron door at the back of the club. We're going downstairs. Ova's heart thudded. She knew what was down there, and she knew what revealing herself would cost. The apron slid from Ova's waist and pooled at her feet like shed skin. For a moment, no one spoke. Joseph's men watched with interest now. Not concern, not restraint. This wasn't about a ruined suit anymore. This was entertainment. Power stretching its limbs. Ova folded the apron carefully and placed it on the edge of the table. The gesture was small, controlled, not defiant, not submissive, intentional. She reached up and removed her glasses, wiping the lenses once with her thumb before setting them beside the apron. Without them, her eyes looked different, sharper, too awake. Joseph noticed the change immediately. His smile didn't fade, but something behind it recalibrated. You're calm, he observed. Ova didn't answer. She followed as his men opened the iron door and motioned her through. The staircase spiraled downward, each step colder than the last. The smell changed as they descended. Leather and perfume replaced by sweat, metal, and disinfectant. The bass from upstairs faded until all that remained was the low hum of fluorescent lights. The basement was not a dungeon. It was a gym. A full-sized ring dominated the center of the room. The canvas bore old stains that no amount of scrubbing had erased. Ropes sagged slightly from use. This was where problems ended. Joseph stepped into the space like it belonged to him. Because it did. If you last 3 minutes, he said casually, your debt disappears. Ova stopped at the edge of the ring. And if I don't? Joseph shrugged. Then you leave here on a stretcher. Or not at all. She nodded once. 3 minutes. An eternity or nothing at all. One of the men snorted. Bare knuckle. Joseph raised his fists. I want to feel it. Ova slipped out of her shoes and stepped onto the canvas barefoot. The mat was familiar beneath her feet. Too familiar. A rush stirred in her chest. Adrenaline, memory, something feral and old. She pushed it down. Control, she told herself. Don't disappear. Don't dominate. Just survive. Joseph circled her, assessing. She didn't raise her fists in a traditional guard. Her hands stayed open, palms angled inward. To the untrained eye, it looked amateurish. It wasn't. Time, one of the men called. Joseph moved immediately. His punch was fast, heavy, designed to end things. Ova saw it coming before his shoulder even rotated. She ducked, awkwardly, deliberately, nearly tripping over her own feet. The punch missed by inches. Joseph grunted, surprised. He swung again. Ova stumbled backward into the ropes, letting them catch her weight. Her breath came fast, uneven. I can't, she gasped, voice shaking. Please! Laughter echoed from the sidelines. Joseph advanced, enjoying himself now. He threw a series of body shots, powerful but sloppy. Over tightened her elbows, absorbing the blows on bone and muscle. To Joseph, it looked like panic. To her, it was calculation. He hits hard, overcommits, leaves openings. One punch slipped through and grazed her cheek. Skin split, warm blood traced down her jaw. Joseph's eyes darkened. He wound up for a finishing blow. Too big, too obvious. Ova reacted before she could stop herself. She dropped her level and drove her fist into his solar plexus. Not full power, but perfect placement. The sound was dull, devastating. Joseph staggered, air exploding from his lungs. He dropped to one knee, choking, eyes wide with shock. Silence crashed over the room. Ova froze. She had crossed the line. A waitress didn't know how to do that. Joseph dragged air back into his body, one painful breath at a time. When he looked up at her, there was no anger in his expression. Only recognition. That, he rasped, wasn't luck. Ova backed away. You slipped, she said quickly. You lost balance. You throw like someone who's done this before, he said. Someone who's done it a lot? He reached for her hand. She tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. He turned her palm upward. Calluses. Old. Thick. Not from trays. From impact. Before he could speak again, the door at the top of the stairs slammed open. "Boss!" a voice shouted. "We've got a problem." Gunfire echoed above. Joseph released Ova instantly, all focus snapping back into place. "Who?" he demanded. "The gallows," the man said. "They're breaching the front." The name hit the room like a dropped knife. Joseph's jaw tightened. Ova's mind shifted gears. This wasn't a bar fight anymore. This was war. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. The door burst open. 3 men flooded the room with military precision. Weapons raised. "Kill everyone," one of them barked. Joseph dove for cover, drawing a pistol. Ova stood in the open, a gun aimed at her chest. Joseph shouted her name, but she was already moving. She ran toward the weapon. The gunman fired. Ova slapped the barrel upward, bullets shredding the ceiling. She closed the distance in a heartbeat and drove her elbow into his throat. Cartilage crunched. He collapsed. She caught the falling weapon, spun, and fired twice. 2 men dropped. The room fell silent again. Only this time it wasn't shock. It was awe. Joseph stared at her, not as a waitress, not as prey, as something else entirely. "Who are you?" he asked. Ova picked up her glasses from the floor and put them back on, hands steady. "We need to leave," she said. "Now." And for the first time in his life, Joseph Moretti listened. They didn't speak as they moved. There wasn't time. The smell of gunpowder clung to the basement like a second atmosphere, sharp and metallic, mixing with the copper tang of blood. Ova took point instinctively. The stolen weapon held low and steady, her movements economical and precise. Joseph noticed everything. The way she checked corners before advancing, the way she listened before opening doors, the way fear never entered her posture. Only focus. This wasn't adrenaline. This was training. They burst into the alley behind the club just as sirens began to rise in the distance. Blue and red lights reflected off wet pavement, turning shadows into something alive. Joseph's men scattered to prearranged vehicles, but Ova grabbed his sleeve. "Not that way," she said sharply. "They'll be watching the exits." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. They cut through a service corridor, ducked into a loading dock, and slipped into the city's bloodstream. Side streets, construction zones, places where cameras were broken or blind. They didn't stop until they reached an underground parking structure 3 blocks away. Joseph leaned against a concrete pillar, breathing hard. Ova scanned the space one last time, then lowered the weapon. "Get in," she said, nodding toward a dented sedan. Joseph stared at the car. That's your escape plan? It's anonymous, she replied, which makes it perfect. He almost laughed. Almost. They drove in silence, the city sliding past in streaks of light. Only when they were safely moving did Joseph speak. You didn't hesitate, he said. Back there. Ova kept her eyes on the road. Hesitation gets people killed. That wasn't self-defense, he continued. That was execution under pressure. She said nothing. Joseph studied her reflection in the windshield, the glasses, the blood drying on her cheek, the calm. You fought like someone who knows how to end fights quickly, he said. And you shot like someone who's done it before. Ova exhaled slowly. You challenged me to a fight, she said. You got one. He smiled faintly. That wasn't a waitress. They reached the edge of Queens before she pulled over beneath an overpass. Get out, she said. Joseph blinked. What? I settled my debt, she said evenly. You're alive. I'm done. She opened the door. He didn't move. There's a bounty on whoever embarrassed the gallows tonight, he said. They won't stop. That's not my problem. It is if they find you, he countered, and they will. Ova turned to him then. Her expression wasn't angry. It was tired. You think I don't know that? She asked. You think tonight was new for me? Joseph watched her carefully. Who are you? He asked again. Not demanding, asking. Ova stared out at the dark street beyond the overpass. Someone who learned early that silence keeps you alive, she said. Until it doesn't. Joseph nodded slowly. You saved my life. I protected myself, she corrected. Same thing, he said. Where do you go now? And in that hesitation, Joseph saw something real, a flicker of vulnerability she hadn't meant to show. Home, she said finally. He studied her face. That's not safe anymore. No place is. Joseph made a decision. Then come with me, he said. She laughed once, sharp and humorless. I don't work for men like you. He met her gaze. I don't command you, he said. I'm asking. She searched his face for manipulation. Found none. Why? She asked. Because, he said quietly. Whatever you're hiding just walked into my war. And if you walk away, they'll hunt you alone. Silence stretched between them. Then Ova reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a burner phone, and handed it to him. One condition, she said. I don't follow orders. I don't hurt innocents. And the moment you cross that line, I walk. Joseph took the phone. Agreed. She started the engine again. And just like that, the waitress disappeared. Joseph's safe house wasn't what Ova expected. There were no marble floors, no velvet drapes, no excess meant to impress. It was a converted industrial loft on the edge of Long Island City. Concrete, glass, steel. Secure without being obvious. Silent in a way that suggested discipline rather than luxury. Ova clocked every detail the moment she stepped inside. Angles, sight lines, blind corners, reinforced doors disguised as minimalist design. Joseph noticed her noticing. You built this yourself? She said. He nodded. After the first time someone tried to kill me, she gave a humorless huff. Only the first? He almost smiled. Inside, the space was dimly lit, clean, and sparsely furnished. A few men were already there, alert, tense, armed. They froze when Joseph entered with a woman in blood-stained clothes and bare feet. This is Ova, Joseph said. She's with me. No explanations, no justifications. The men nodded and stepped aside. Ova felt the weight of it. Power didn't ask for permission. It declared reality. Joseph turned to her. You're hurt. It's superficial. Sit. She didn't move. I'm fine. He studied her, then surprised her by stepping back. Your call. She finally sat on the edge of a metal chair while one of the men produced a first aid kit. Ova waved him off and cleaned the cut on her cheek herself. Hands steady. Joseph watched. "You fight like someone who hates fighting," he said. She didn't look at him. "I fight because not fighting is worse." He absorbed that. "Someone trained you," he said. "Professionally." "Yes." "Who?" She paused. "Someone who shouldn't have." Joseph didn't push. Instead, he poured her a glass of water and set it within reach. "You saved my life," he said again. "That gives you leverage." "I don't want leverage. What do you want?" She considered the question carefully. "To sleep without looking at the door every 10 minutes." Joseph nodded. "Then stay," he said. "At least until this blows over." She met his gaze. "And when it doesn't? Then we make choices." Ova leaned back slightly, assessing him. "You're not what I expected," she said. He laughed softly. "People say that after they try to kill me. That's not what I meant." She gestured vaguely. "You didn't force me. You didn't threaten. You listened." Shrugged. "Power that needs coercion is already fragile." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Fine," she said, "but I don't disappear into your world. I don't become invisible again." "I wouldn't ask you to," he replied. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, and somewhere in the city, the gallows were already rewriting their plans. Sleep didn't come easily. Ova lay on the narrow bed Joseph had offered. Clean sheets, no locks on the door, no guards stationed outside unless she asked for them. That alone told her something about the man who owned this place. He understood choice. Still, her body stayed half-wired, muscles coiled beneath the surface. She listened to the building settle, to the distant thrum of traffic, to the subtle cadence of footsteps outside the room. She cataloged every sound until her breathing finally slowed. Morning crept in gray and quiet. When she stepped into the main space, Joseph was already awake, sleeves rolled, standing over a wall of screens. Live camera feeds, news channels muted, maps with glowing nodes marking territory. This was his ring. He glanced at her reflection in the glass. "Coffee?" he asked. "Yes." No honorifics. No performative politeness. Just function. She took the mug and leaned against the counter, watching the screens. "You're losing ground," she said. Joseph's eyebrow lifted. "Explain." She nodded toward the map. "Those red zones weren't contested last month. Someone's moving money and people fast. Faster than consolidation should allow." He looked again. "You read this quickly." "I read patterns," she said. "It's how you stay alive." He studied her openly now, no pretense of disinterest. "The gallows aren't just retaliating," she continued. "They're baiting you. They want you to overreact." Joseph exhaled slowly. "That's exactly what my lieutenants are telling me to do." "And you haven't," she said. "No." "Why?" He met her eyes. "Because instinct says this isn't about me." Ova nodded once. Good instinct. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, not charged. Productive. Joseph broke it first. "Stay," he said. "Not as muscle, as eyes." She considered. "I don't belong in your world." "You already stepped into it," he replied. "And you changed the outcome." She took a sip of coffee, gaze drifting back to the screens. "You want me to help," she said, "but I don't compromise my lines." "Name them." "No innocent casualties," she said immediately. "No coercion. No collateral." Joseph didn't hesitate. Agreed. She searched his face for deception. Found resolve. "Then I stay," she said. "Temporarily." That was how it began. Not with violence, with observation. Over the next days, Ova didn't fight. She listened. She watched. She mapped conversations the way other people mapped streets. She noticed who interrupted who avoided eye contact, who spoke too fast when Joseph entered the room. The enemy wasn't outside. It was inside the structure. Joseph saw it too, how his world reacted to her presence. Men who usually postured went quiet when she spoke. Others bristled, threatened by a woman who didn't ask permission to exist. One night, as rain streaked the windows and the city glowed beneath them, Joseph finally asked the question he'd been circling. "You were more than a fighter," he said. "Weren't you?" Ova's jaw tightened. "I was a tool," she said. "Then I chose not to be." He nodded. "I respect that." She looked at him then. Really looked. This man who wielded power like a language, who could order violence with a nod, but chose restraint instead. "You're not afraid of me," she said. "I should be," he replied, "but I'm not." "Why?" "Because you don't want my throne," he said. "You want peace." The word landed heavier than either of them expected. Outside, thunder rolled. And somewhere beneath the city's noise, plans were being made. Plans that would force Ova to decide how far she was willing to step back into the light. The message came just after midnight. Ova was at the table with Joseph. The two of them bent over a quiet war map spread like scars across the screen. Coffee gone cold. The city humming below, as if nothing fragile was unfolding above it. Joseph's phone vibrated once. He didn't pick it up immediately. Ova noticed. That hesitation mattered. When he finally read the message, something in his expression changed. Not fear, not anger. Calculation interrupted by something colder. "They've taken a child," he said. Ova straightened slowly. "Whose?" "One of my accountants," Joseph replied. "Low level, clean, family man. He skimmed nothing. He knows nothing." "That's why they took the kid," she said. "He has no leverage except love." Joseph nodded. "They want me to meet." "Of course they do." Ova said, "And you won't." He looked at her sharply. "They've set a clock, which means they expect you to panic. They expect me to choose." Ova folded her arms. "This is your line," she said quietly. "And it's mine." Joseph didn't look away. "I won't trade territory for a child," he said. "And I won't sacrifice one either." "Good," she said. "Then we do it my way." He raised an eyebrow. "Your way tends to involve breaking bones." "Not tonight." She tapped the screen, pulling up the live feeds she'd been quietly curating for days. Traffic cameras, service entrances, blind alleys. "They want you to show up scared," she said. "So don't." "They'll kill the child if I don't appear." "Only if they think they still have control," Ova replied. "We take that away." "How?" She met his gaze. "We expose the betrayal." He frowned. "What betrayal?" She pointed. "Your cousin," she said. "The one who suggested negotiation. The one who always wants to de-escalate. He's been feeding them just enough truth to keep them confident." Joseph went very still. "That's a serious accusation." "I know," she said. "That's why I waited." She slid a tablet across the table. "Messages, transfers, location pings." Joseph read silently. The silence stretched. Then he exhaled. "Slow. Measured. He helped raise me," Joseph said. "I know. That doesn't make him innocent." "No," Ova agreed. "It makes him dangerous." Joseph looked up. "What do you need?" She didn't smile. "Permission," she said. "And trust. You already have both." They moved quickly after that. Not with soldiers, not with spectacle, with precision. Ova didn't go in as a fighter. She went in as a witness. The warehouse where the child was being held was loud with emptiness, wind through broken windows, water dripping somewhere unseen. Men paced, nervous, overconfident. They didn't see her until she spoke. "Put the phone down," she said calmly. Guns swung toward her. She didn't flinch. "Check your messages," she continued. "Every one of you." They hesitated. Then phones buzzed. Screens lit up with warrants. Bank accounts frozen. Names exposed. "Your boss sold you out." The words repeated across devices. Confusion cracked the room open. Ova stepped forward. "You were never meant to survive this," she said. "But the child will." A man lunged. She ended him in 3 moves. Not brutal. Final. The others dropped their weapons. When Joseph arrived minutes later, The child was already wrapped in a blanket, breathing hard but alive. Joseph crouched, steadying the shaking boy. "It's over," he said. The child nodded, clinging to him. Joseph stood and looked at Ova. She had blood on her sleeve. Not much, but enough. "You crossed back in," he said quietly. She met his gaze. "I crossed so someone else wouldn't have to." He nodded once, respect deepening into something heavier. Something earned. Later, as dawn softened the edges of the city, Joseph stood at the window of the safe house. "I'm dismantling parts of my operation," he said. "The ones that make this possible." Ova joined him. "That will make enemies." "I already have them," he replied. "I'd rather know who they are." She studied his reflection. "You're changing the rules," she said. He looked at her. "You taught me how." Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that somewhere within it, a power structure had just bent. Not through fear, but through choice. The aftermath didn't come with celebration. There were no raised glasses, no speeches, no victory laps. Just exhaustion, bone deep and quiet, and a city that kept moving as if nothing fundamental had shifted. But something had. Joseph felt it before he could name it. In the days following the warehouse, his people behaved differently. Conversation stopped when Ova entered the room, not out of dismissal, but awareness. Men who once spoke over one another now waited, not because she demanded it, because she didn't. She never raised her voice, never threatened, never reminded anyone what she was capable of. She simply told the truth, plainly, and let people decide what to do with it. That unsettled them more than violence ever could. Joseph watched it happen from the margins of his own empire. It was humbling. One evening, as rain painted the windows and the city glowed dim and distant, Joseph found Ova in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, methodically cleaning a knife she hadn't used in days. "You don't need to do that," he said. She didn't look up. "I like things ready." For what? For the moment silence stops being enough. He leaned against the counter. "You could leave," he said. "No one would stop you." She met his gaze then. "And you'd survive?" "Yes," he answered honestly. "But I'd go back to being the man I was before you showed up." She considered that. That man, she said, challenged a waitress to a fight because he was angry about a suit. Joseph winced. "That man," she continued, "is gone." He nodded slowly. "I don't want to rule the way I did," he said. "But change attracts blood. It always does." "What happens when it comes for you?" he asked. Ova shrugged lightly. "It already has. I'm still standing." There was a long pause. Then Joseph did something no one else in his world had ever seen him do. He sat, not across from her, beside her. "I don't want you to be my weapon," he said quietly, "or my shield." "Good," she replied. "I'm tired of being both. I want you to choose," he said, "every step." She studied him carefully, searching for the trap. There wasn't one. "Then here's my choice," she said. "I stay until the internal threat is neutralized. After that, I decide. Fair." She returned to cleaning the knife. Minutes later, she spoke again. "You know why your cousin betrayed you." Joseph nodded. He thought I was getting soft. "And you are," she said. He smiled faintly. "So are you." She snorted. "No, I'm getting precise." The real war revealed itself, not in gunfire, but in meetings. Quiet ones. Ova began sitting in, not as muscle, not as spectacle, but as presence. She didn't argue unless it mattered. When she did speak, she cut through posturing with unnerving clarity. "That plan fails because it relies on fear," she'd say. "Fear makes people sloppy. Sloppy people leak." Joseph watched men twice her age and 10 times her size shift uncomfortably under her gaze, not because she intimidated them, because she refused to lie. For the moment silence stops being enough. He leaned against the counter. "You could leave," he said. "No one would stop you." She met his gaze then. And you'd survive? Yes, he answered honestly. But I'd go back to being the man I was before you showed up. She considered that. That man, she said, challenged a waitress to a fight because he was angry about a suit. Joseph winced. That man, she continued, is gone. He nodded slowly. I don't want to rule the way I did, he said, but change attracts blood. It always does. What happens when it comes for you? He asked. Ova shrugged lightly. It already has. I'm still standing. There was a long pause. Then Joseph did something no one else in his world had ever seen him do. He sat, not across from her, beside her. I don't want you to be my weapon, he said quietly, or my shield. Good, she replied. I'm tired of being both. I want you to choose, he said, every step. She studied him carefully, searching for the trap. There wasn't one. Then here's my choice, she said. I stay until the internal threat is neutralized. After that, I decide. Fair. She returned to cleaning the knife. Minutes later, she spoke again. You know why your cousin betrayed you. Joseph nodded. He thought I was getting soft. And you are, she said. He smiled faintly. So are you. She snorted. No, I'm getting precise. The real war revealed itself not in gunfire, but in meetings. Quiet ones. Ova began sitting in, not as muscle, not as spectacle, but as presence. She didn't argue unless it mattered. When she did speak, she cut through posturing with unnerving clarity. That plan fails because it relies on fear, she'd say. Fear makes people sloppy. Sloppy people leak. Joseph watched men twice her age and 10 times her size shift uncomfortably under her gaze, not because she intimidated them, because she refused to lie. One night, Joseph found her on the balcony. The city spread beneath them like a living map. You don't look at it like you want to own it, he said. I look at it like I want it quieter, she replied. He chuckled softly. That might be the most dangerous ambition I've ever heard. She glanced at him sideways. You're afraid? No, he said. I'm relieved. She raised an eyebrow. Of what? That power doesn't have to rot the person holding it. The words hung between them. Honest, vulnerable. Joseph turned to face her fully. I won't touch you unless you ask, he said suddenly. I won't assume anything. Ever. Ova blinked, surprised by the directness. Why are you telling me this? Because men like me take, he said. And I don't want to be that man with you. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded once. Thank you. That night, the gallows made their final mistake. They moved publicly. A coordinated hit meant to embarrass, to remind the city who still ruled the shadows. Ova saw it coming hours before anyone else. This ends tonight, she said. Joseph looked at her. How? And devastating. By morning, indictments would fall, alliances would fracture, names would be spoken aloud for the first time in years. The gallows would lose what they valued most, anonymity. As dawn broke, Joseph stood beside Ova in the quiet control room, screens lighting their faces. You don't have to do this, he said one last time. She met his gaze. I know. Then she pressed the button, and power, true power, shifted its weight. The city woke up to sirens and headlines. Not the kind that faded by noon. The kind that rewrote maps. Federal raids hit 3 boroughs before sunrise. Office doors were kicked in. Safe houses were emptied. Shell companies collapsed in real time as accounts froze mid-transaction. Names that had lived only in whispers were spoken aloud on national television. The gallows didn't fall in a blaze of gunfire. They fell in daylight. Joseph watched it unfold from the control room, jaw tight, hands still. Years of violence had taught him how to prepare for blood, but this was something else entirely. This was exposure. Ova stood beside him, arms folded, eyes scanning the screens with calm precision. They'll try to spin it, Joseph said, claim betrayal. Rogue actors. They always do, she replied. But the paper trail doesn't lie. One of Joseph's men entered quietly. Boss, he said, phones are lighting up. Everyone wants to know where you stand. Joseph didn't answer immediately. He looked at Ova. She met his gaze. This is the moment, she said. If you flinch, nothing changes. He nodded once. Put it out, he told the man. All of it. By noon, Joseph Moretti's statement circulated everywhere it mattered. No denials, no deflection, no threats. Just a line drawn in public. Those aligned with the gallows were cut loose. No protection, no retaliation, no quiet deals. Loyalty would no longer be inherited. It would be proven. The backlash was immediate. Messages poured in. Some furious, some desperate, some terrified. Men who had once bowed now begged. Others warned him he'd signed his own death warrant. Joseph absorbed it all without comment. Later, when the noise died down, he found Ova alone in the quiet of the apartment, standing by the window. You could disappear now, he said. No one would know where to look. She nodded. I could. But you won't, he added. She glanced at him. No, she said, not yet. He leaned against the frame beside her. You dismantled an empire without firing a shot, he said. Do you know how rare that is? I didn't dismantle it, she replied. I gave it a chance to become something else. Joseph considered that. Do you ever regret stepping in? He asked. That night? She thought about the wine spilling across his shirt, the slap he never landed, the ring below the club. No, she said. Silence would have cost more. The days that followed were tense but quieter. Violence dropped, negotiations replaced threats. People listened differently, not because Ova was feared, but because she'd proven that truth, once spoken, couldn't be buried again. One evening, as the city settled into an uneasy calm, Joseph approached her with an envelope. What's that? She asked. A clean passport, he said. A new name. Funds. No strings. She didn't take it. Why? She asked. Because you earned the right to choose, he replied. She studied the envelope for a long moment, then set it on the table. I'm not done choosing yet, she said. Joseph smiled, not triumphantly, not possessively. Just quietly. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that its balance had been altered by a woman who had once carried trays through a room full of monsters and had refused to stay invisible. The envelope stayed on the table for 3 days. No one touched it. Not because it wasn't valuable, because it was. A clean identity, money that could dissolve borders, an exit without pursuit. In Joseph's world, that kind of offer was usually a leash disguised as a gift. This one wasn't. That unsettled Ova more than any threat ever had. She spent those days doing ordinary things. Cooking simple meals. Cleaning a space that was already immaculate. Walking the perimeter of the building at irregular hours. Not because she expected trouble, but because habit was hard to unlearn. Joseph watched her without intruding. He had learned that silence, when chosen, was a form of respect. On the 4th night, the call came. Not from an enemy, from someone who had been quiet for too long. Joseph took it in his office door half open. Overheard only fragments. No, I won't protect you. You made your choice. This ends now. When he came out, his face was composed, but something behind his eyes had shifted. They want assurances. Ova leaned against the counter. About you? About us, he corrected. She straightened slightly. There is no us. That's exactly what scares them. The council meeting was held in a neutral space. Glass walls, no weapons, no theatrics. 12 men who represented decades of inherited power sat around a table designed to intimidate by sheer scale. Ova wasn't invited. She came anyway. Not as an act of defiance, as a statement of fact. When she entered, conversation stalled. Eyes tracked her movement, measuring, reassessing. Joseph didn't introduce her. He didn't have to. One of the men cleared his throat. This isn't appropriate. Ova met his gaze calmly. Neither was kidnapping a child. Silence followed. Joseph sat back in his chair, hands folded, and let it happen. Another man leaned forward. You're changing too much, too fast. Yes, Joseph said. That's the point. And her? A third asked. What role does she play? Ova answered before Joseph could. I don't play a role, she said. I set conditions. Murmurs rippled around the table. Conditions? Someone scoffed. Yes, she replied evenly. No trafficking. No leverage through families. No silence purchased with fear. A man laughed sharply. You think you can dictate terms? Ova looked at him. I think you already know what happens if you don't change, she said. And I think that's why you're still sitting. The room went still. Joseph felt it then, the moment power recalibrated, not seized, recognized. One by one, objections softened into questions. Questions into negotiations. By the time the meeting ended, nothing had been signed. But everything had shifted. Outside, Joseph exhaled. They'll test this, he said. They'll test you. Ova nodded. They should. He studied her profile as city lights reflected off the glass. You didn't take the passport, he said. No. Why? She thought about it carefully. Because running would make this feel like survival, she said. And this isn't that anymore. He turned to face her. What is it then? Choice, she said, and responsibility. He absorbed the words. That night, they didn't touch. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, the city humming beneath them, the distance between their shoulders intentional and respected. Joseph spoke into the quiet. When this is stable, he said, when the structure holds without you, what will you do? Ova didn't answer immediately. I don't know, she admitted. That's new for me. He smiled faintly. For someone who plans everything, she returned it, small and real. Even fighters get to rest, she said. Outside, the city breathed. And for the first time in a long while, it wasn't holding its breath in fear. Stability didn't arrive all at once. It came in increments. Quiet mornings without alerts, meetings that ended without raised voices, nights when Joseph slept more than 4 hours without waking to bad news. Each small change felt fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of a table. Ova understood fragility. She treated it with care. Her role shifted without ceremony. She stopped sitting in on every conversation and began training the people who would replace her presence, how to notice patterns, how to question assumptions, how to pause before reacting. She taught them how to listen for what wasn't being said. Joseph watched it happen with something close to awe. You're building redundancy, he said one afternoon as they reviewed a reorganized chain of responsibility. I'm building an exit, she replied. He nodded. For you. For everyone, she corrected. Systems that need one person to survive are already broken. He leaned back, absorbing that. You're dismantling me. She shook her head. I'm making sure you're not the single point of failure. That night, the gallows made one last attempt to reclaim the narrative. A press leak, a smear campaign, anonymous sources claiming Joseph had orchestrated the raids himself to consolidate power. Old tactics. Joseph didn't react immediately. Ova read the pieces, then closed the screen. They're fishing for you to deny it, she said. To get loud? And if I don't? He asked. They'll burn out, she replied. Truth doesn't need defending forever. He took her advice. The story collapsed under its own weight within 48 hours. What followed surprised everyone. Not a counterattack. A restructuring. Joseph announced the dissolution of 2 long-standing operations and the creation of a legitimate holding company to absorb the rest. Jobs stayed. Violence dropped. Money flowed differently, cleaner, slower, traceable. Enemies called it inevitable. Ova called it progress. The day the final transition papers were signed, Joseph found her packing a single bag. You're leaving, he said. Yes. He stood in the doorway, not blocking her path. Where will you go? She zipped the bag and set it by the door. I want to see what quiet feels like, she said. Someplace where no one knows what my hands can do. He smiled, then grew serious. I won't ask you to stay, he said. But I'll say this once. She waited. This doesn't work without you, he said. But it can continue. She nodded. That's the goal. He hesitated. And us? She met his gaze steadily. We were never a guarantee, she said gently. We were a choice. And we made it, carefully. He accepted that. Later, as dawn softened the city again, Joseph walked her to the door. He didn't reach for her, didn't promise anything, just said, "Thank you." Ova paused, then turned back. "For the record," she said, "you listened when it mattered." He inclined his head. "So did you." She left without spectacle. No one followed. No one tried to stop her. Weeks passed. Then the city adjusted. Violence dropped. The power vacuum never came. The new structure held, not because it was feared, but because it was clear. Joseph sometimes caught himself scanning rooms, expecting to see her in the corner, arms folded, eyes sharp, saying nothing. She never was. But the silence she left behind was different. It wasn't empty. It was intentional. And it reminded him of the one lesson she had never stopped teaching. Power doesn't need to shout. It needs to choose. Ova chose a town no one searched for. It sat between a river and a line of low hills, the kind of place people pass through without noticing. The air smelled like wet earth and cut grass. Nights were dark enough to hear your own thoughts. She rented a small apartment above a closed bookstore. One room, a narrow kitchen, a window that looked out over a street where nothing important ever happened. For the first week, she slept. Not the shallow, coiled rest of someone waiting for danger, but real sleep, heavy, dreamless, the kind that left her muscles sore from finally letting go. She took a job at a cafe 2 blocks away, not because she needed the money, because routine grounded her. The owner never asked questions. Customers never lingered on her. She poured coffee, wiped counters, learned names. It was ordinary. It was everything she'd never had. Some nights, though, the quiet pressed too close. She would find herself listening for sounds that weren't there. Her hands would tense at sudden laughter. Old instincts surfaced without permission. On those nights, she went for long runs along the river, letting exhaustion burn the edge off memory. Joseph didn't call. That mattered. He sent a single message 3 weeks after she left. Structure holds. Thank you. She didn't reply. Not because she didn't care, because closure didn't need conversation. Back in the city, Joseph Moretti was learning how to live without chaos as his primary language. It wasn't easy. Power, once tasted, always wanted to expand again. People tested him, pushed boundaries, waited to see if the old reflexes would return. They didn't. He listened more, spoke less, removed men who mistook restraint for weakness. And when decisions were hard, he asked a single question Ova had taught him to ask. Does this require fear or honesty? The answer simplified everything. One evening, months later, Joseph stood in Velour's renovated space, no longer a fortress, no longer a trap. The club had changed. Softer lighting, transparent ownership, different clientele. A server passed by, and for a split second, Joseph thought, no, it wasn't her. It never would be. And that was the point. Ova's life settled into something resembling peace. She learned the rhythm of the town, which streets flooded in heavy rain, which neighbors talked too much, which silences were comfortable. She started training again, but alone. Early mornings, an old gym with peeling paint and no mirrors. She worked the heavy bag slowly, deliberately, not to sharpen herself into a weapon, but to remind her body that it was hers. One afternoon, a teenage girl hovered near the gym door, watching. You teach? The girl asked, awkward, hopeful. Ova considered her. The way her shoulders hunched, the way her eyes flicked to the floor, then back up. I teach awareness, Ova said, And control. The girl nodded eagerly. That was how it started. Not with glory, with patience. Word spread quietly. Girls, women, a few men. People who didn't want to be fighters, but wanted to stop being afraid. Years later, the story would be told incorrectly. People would say Joseph Moretti had grown soft. That age had dulled his edge. That changing times had forced his hand. None of that was true. Joseph Moretti hadn't lost power. He had learned how to put it down. The city remembered him as a man who ended a cycle rather than feeding it. His name still carried weight, but it no longer crushed rooms into silence. It steadied them. That was legacy. And it wasn't built alone. Ova never returned to the city. She didn't need to. Her life became small in the best possible ways. Morning coffee with regulars who knew her only as someone dependable. Training sessions that ended in laughter instead of bruises. Evenings spent reading on the fire escape as the town settled into itself. She kept no trophies, no reminders of who she had been forced to become. Only the skills she chose to keep. Sometimes, when storms rolled in heavy and fast, she'd feel the old tension rise in her spine, the instinct to prepare for something unnamed. But it passed, because now she trusted the quiet. One afternoon, a package arrived at the cafe. No return address. Inside was a single book, first edition, carefully preserved. On the inside cover, a simple note in careful handwriting. For the woman who taught me that power kneels to truth. Ova closed the book gently. She didn't smile right away. When she did, it was small, private, real. That night she walked home along the river, the water dark and patient beside her. She stopped on the bridge and watched the current for a long time. She thought of all the moments where silence had nearly cost her everything, and the one moment where breaking it changed everything instead. She had not sought power. She had not chased justice. She had simply refused to let wrong go unanswered. And in doing so, she had shifted the weight of a world she never meant to touch. That was the truth no one could sensationalize. That the strongest force in the room is often the person who doesn't want to rule it. Ova turned back toward home. The night was calm, the future unwritten. And for the first time in her life, that felt like freedom. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, but silence, when chosen, is restraint. And restraint, paired with courage, is what changes systems that brute force never can. Power doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who know when to speak and when to walk away. If this story stayed with you, if you believe silence isn't weakness, if you believe power should answer to truth, then you're in the right place. These stories are about invisible people who refuse to stay small, about moments that change everything, about justice that doesn't shout but lands. If you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. New long-form narratives every week. High stakes, moral choices, earned endings. And if this story meant something to you, leave a comment. I read them. Until next time, stay sharp, stay human, and never underestimate the quiet ones.